boxing and the return of boxing finally. I know we mentioned BT Sport has started, and also the back garden
of Eddie Hearn's, the match room. So what's happened? Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren, they've got a stable of many fighters that all need work. They've got world champions, European champions, British champions, and they've been stagnating at home on lockdown. So fortunately, the British Boxing Board of Control has said, we want boxing back. So these are the measures you're going to have to take. You've got this quarantine the boxers for a certain amount of time. They've got to wear masks. They've got to wear surgical gloves. There's loads of different protocol that's put in place to fight.
Well, mentally and physically with these boxers, how do you think they've managed to cope during lockdown? How have they kept their fitness on peak, especially with gyms being closed and no one knowing when this end date was coming and they could fight again?
It's been very tough. As the lockdown started, we all thought it'd be a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks. Okay, it can't be more than 2 months. No. Can't be more than 3 months, surely.
No.
Here we are. We're like, it's only just now. Pubs are opening, gyms are nearly opening. Things are starting to. I like the way they open pubs before gyms. I don't know how that works.
I kind of like it, kind of don't.
Yeah, exactly. But things are starting to move now, and boxers need to realise they're not going to get the 12-week preparation time they would usually get.
Yeah.
And now that the rules are changing in terms of crowds, in terms of television networks giving dates, a fighter may get 4 weeks' notice, and if he's not physically in good enough shape to fight in 4 weeks, he may pull out. There's a few big name fighters say whatever time was given wasn't ample for them to be in top line condition. But as a professional athlete, not knowing the date of a potential fight, you should keep yourself at least 6 weeks away from fighting. You should be fit enough that 6 weeks' time you do just a month of hard sparring and training, have a taper down for 2 weeks, and you should be ready to fight 12 round fit for a fight. Some fighters aren't as professional as others, but at the moment, Derek Chisora doesn't have a rock solid date. We're looking at the middle of October currently, but he was in there today. He did 8 rounds of heavy sparring today, but he doesn't have an end date. That's professionalism. He trains twice a day, 5 days a week at the moment, once on a Saturday. So he's putting the work in without any end date, but that's professionalism. And a lot of fighters need to realise they're not going to get the opportunities of time to prepare as they once did.
And how much does it affect them not having fans there?
It makes a massive difference to certain fighters. Derek Chisora, I know it'll make a difference too. He feeds off the crowd. He's had fights where he's been on the receiving end of a hell of a beating, and the crowd is still behind him, calling, Derek, they're really building them up, and he then comes back and turns the fight around. If it wasn't for the crowd, I'm not sure if he could have done that. Sometimes you need the crowd to spur you on, but as a professional boxer, you need to fight with the parameters that are set for you, and it's the same for both fighters. I'm sure Povetkin or Alexander Usyk or whoever's in there in this heavyweight mix would prefer to have their Russian crowd cheering for him, but now it's just deadly silent. All you hear is the two crowds, so it's at least you can't hear what the other guy's saying, because Povetkin's corner is going to be screaming in Russian, we're going to be screaming in English. At least we can't really hear what each other is saying. Yeah. But I've had to box in quiet environments as an amateur, in international amateur tournaments, fighting in Poland, fighting in Russia, fighting in America, in smaller tournaments. And it's a bit strange, but I've never really had an issue with it, because when you're in there, your adrenaline's pumping, you just go for it. You can't really see what's out there. You hear it, you're aware of it, but you're still tuned in if you're a professional.
So what has been your greatest night in the sport?
I'd say my greatest night was when I captured the WBA heavyweight championship of the world, a belt that all of my heroes, Muhammad Ali, Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson, all of the great, George Foreman, Frazier, to have the belt that all of my heroes had wrapped around my waist against the guy who was the biggest ever heavyweight champion in the history of boxing, Nikolai Valuev, 7'2", was 215 or 16 centimeters. The guy was an absolute literal giant. He outweighed me by 50 kilograms, and it was a fight that I had to win to fulfill my lifelong ambition of becoming a heavyweight champion. Ever since I saw Rocky IV with Ivan Drago and Sylvester Stallone, and Rocky going at it, it was against a big Russian on foreign soil, and he went over there and did it. In my mind, I was always going to fight a giant Russian, and by pure coincidence, that actually happened.
Your Rocky moment.
My Rocky moment happened. I remember walking to the ring thinking this is it. And then I got into the ring, and then he came to the ring. And as he walks through, he was so big, but I'm thinking, this is it.
Wow.
You know, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. In the last round, I hit him and wobbled his legs. I nearly knocked him out. But to go on foreign soil and to win on points against, you know, the current champion, you know, he had an opportunity to give me a rematch in the contract, and he chose not to. So then I defended my title a couple of times. But, you know, for me, that was by far my biggest and greatest night.
So I was going to ask you then what your favourite knockout was.
My favourite knockout was my first world title fight against Jean-Marc Mormec in Levallois in France. He was, you know, a long-standing champion, beat every man he'd ever faced in the last 10 years going into that fight. You know, I was a big underdog going out there to foreign soil to fight another champion. He was considered #1. He had the Ring Magazine belt, WBA title, WBC title. He had the IBF, but he stripped him right before I fought him. You know, and I went over there, and, you know, he knocked me down in the 4th round. You know, he had a very tough style to beat, but I was able to get to my feet and then knock him out in round 7. And, you know, that for me was my first, you know, that was me proving everyone wrong, that what happened in the Carl Thompson fight was an anomaly. It was a learning lesson. Right. And this, what I showed in the fight against Mormec, all of the reasons why I lost in the first fight, and that it was down to conditioning, you know, mental strength, physical strength, and, you know, I was able to rise to the occasion. So that was for me my best knockout.
You seem to remember all your fights in great
most of them. Yeah. I've watched loads of my fights over and over. I don't watch them as much as I'd like to, but I was there. I felt it. I felt the crowd. I read the news clippings afterwards. I watched all the pre-fight hype. Yeah, I really like to get into the flavour into the fight. I'd watch people's predictions. I'd go online and look at forums talking about who thinks are going to do what. I'd love to get.
That doesn't put you off. I didn't.
No, because I know what's going to happen in my mind. I'm going to win the fight. I'm just interested to see how that is, and I sometimes adapt my pre-fight hype depending on what the masses feel. Wow. You know, if they feel I'm going to get knocked out, I'll really, I was like, okay, I'm going to put a lot more of the emphasis on me knocking him out and trying to prove everybody wrong. But, you know, I really love to really get involved in the build-up to a fight. I love the back and forth WWE factor where you got two guys getting in each other's faces, a little bit of a scuffle. You know, when I fought Derek Chisora, the guy who I now manage, we had to have a cage between us because the hostility was so strong. So I've always loved the hype and the build-up to the big fights. So
what advice would you give to a boxer on how to become a world champion?
My advice today would be different than my advice to someone who was my age back in the 90s. It would be try to focus your energy on being the best boxer in the world rather than looking like you're the best boxer on Instagram or online. That's not important. How many followers you have, how many likes you have, doesn't get you any closer to becoming a world champion. If you spend an hour a day on your apps trying to build your following, that's a good thing. I understand why you do that. But if that hour could be spent practicing slipping punches or doing weight training or going for a jog or doing a boxing session, if there's two people identical and one person spends all the time online, one person spends time in the gym will beat the online guy all day long. He might not have as many followers, but once you've achieved your goal, then you have a team who do your social following for you. Yeah. And then you keep focusing your energy on winning. So try to take your focus off everyone by looking like a winner and put it on being a winner.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you very much for talking to us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.